Undertale is a game that, despite not playing until my last year of high school, instantly became a classic for me with its unforgettable characters and beautiful OST. But while most people play it for the nostalgia, I play it for the grind. In this video, I set out to be Undertale's hardest route without getting hit a single time. This video is split into two parts. The first part will act as a guide to the run so that even if you've never seen Undertale before, you'll be able to follow along. However, even if you're already a master at Undertale, stick around as you might be able to learn something new, or you might want to use it as a refresher to the run itself. The second part is my journey, where you'll get to see all the struggles and pain I went through to actually finish the challenge. Let's start at the beginning. For the people who've never played Undertale, the game follows the story of Frisk, a kid who fell into the underground world full of monsters who've been sealed there ever since losing a war against the humans. To escape, you travel through the underground while meeting the unforgettable cast of characters who manage to bring the underground to life. How your journey ends depends entirely on the choices you make along the way, and because of that, there are three main ways to finish the game. The neutral route, which is sort of the default if you don't commit to any of the other special endings, the true pacifist route, where you spare everyone and get the happy ending, and the genocide route, which is what I'm doing in this video. The genocide route is basically Undertale's hard mode. To do it, you have to purposely hunt down and fight every monster in every area until you've killed every single monster possible. Once you do that, you unlock the two most famous and brutal fights in the game, Undyne the Undying and Sans Undertale. Fortunately, unlike common hitless games such as the Souls series, the Undertale rule set is pretty easy to understand. Getting hit is as simple as taking damage with the exception of the final slam in the Sans fight and the Undyne running sections. However, I'll cover them more when I reach them in the run explanation. Besides that, the run has to be finished in one go, meaning I can't close the game for any reason just so that we know it's not cut or cheated. And if you're interested, I'm playing on patch 1.01 on Steam, just because that's what I had downloaded for the practice tool, and I don't believe it changes much or anything between patches. To get started, the run is split into 7 sections consisting of 5 areas and 2 major bosses: Ruins, Snowdin, Waterfall, Undying the Undying, Hotland, the Core, and finally Sans Undertale. In terms of difficulty, based on the raw skill and RNG needed to beat each section, I'd tier them something like this, with the much harder splits all appearing in the second half of the run. And so to start off the journey, we have to find a way to maximize our time as much as possible, as on a normal genocide route, it can take a couple hours to complete each run, which is obviously not good if we're resetting multiple times a session. Fortunately, Undertale's community found a nice workaround to lower the game down to just above 1 hour. The majority of time spent in the genocide run is actually trying to find or encounter the enemies to fight. Undertale's encounter system works by using a step count. Once entering a room, the game will randomly generate a number, which once Frisk hits the same number in steps, will trigger an enemy encounter. Once beating the enemy, the first random number is then added to with another random number to make the next step count goal. This goal is then added each time, making it take longer and longer between each fight. I believe this was done so that the other paths such as pacifists wouldn't have to deal with the constant bombardment of enemies, unlike what we want with genocide. The workaround I mentioned earlier is to leave the room and come back. This resets the step count to a number rolled once instead of however many times you've already encountered something. Now with that out of the way, starting at square one, Ruins is by far the easiest and most consistent section in the game. You start by not falling asleep at the wheel, or in my case, tabbing out to change music to avoid getting hit by Flowey, then follow alongside Toriel, murk the scripted Frogget, and continue until you reach this room. Here, we run against the wall until we've encountered our first real enemy, who in this room will either be one Whimsun or one Frogget. A Whimsun has 10 HP, meaning any attack will kill it in one go, so you never actually have to deal with any of its attacks. If it's a Frogget, however, they have 30 HP, meaning it'll take 2 hits to kill, and you will always have to dodge one of its 2 attacks. The easier of the 2 attacks is where the Frogget will jump at you, and all you have to do is move to the top right where it'll be impossible for it to hit you. Then for its other move, it spawns flies from the top of the screen, in which you move to the bottom left of the box, wait for the flies to start moving again for the second time, and then move to the bottom right. Once dealing with the first enemy, we then reset the step count by moving back and forth between rooms, and repeat until we either get the but nobody came screen, meaning we've killed every enemy in the section, or if you'd like, once hitting level 3, move forward into the room before Nabstablook to farm, as in there you can encounter multiple enemies at once, which just saves a little bit of time. I personally prefer to stay as consistent as possible and farm in the first room, as the few minutes it did save didn't really make up for the frustration I'd get from losing a run after 10 minutes of enemies. If you do want to do it, however, all you need to know is to always kill the Whimsins first when given the opportunity. Now, the reason we have to get all the enemy encounters before Nabstablook is because once we activate the genocide route, Nabstablook fades away before we can touch him, which lets us avoid his battle and more importantly his move where he starts crying and boxes us off with his tears until we get hit. After this, all that's left is to meet up with Toriel at her house, follow her into the basement, and... Snowdin, while not being the hardest area by any means, introduces us to some quirks found throughout the rest of the run. You first sprint down the long corridor of trees and break your keyboard skipping the skelly shenanigans until you reach this room with this chest. Here you pull out the tough gloves which spawn in your chest and equip them to make sure you can deal enough damage to kill most of the enemies in the area. Before leaving the room, dance on the top wall to encounter the first and one of the necessary enemies of the area, a Snowdrake. Snowdrake has two moves, one where he spawns whatever these pillars are that dart off in random ways, and the other where he spawns crescents which move in a straight line and slowly section off the box. For the first one, my tip is to stay around the middle of the box, as when you're too close to the edge, sometimes they'll spawn a pillar right next to you and if you don't react fast enough can result in a hit. And for its other move, the strategy is to get to the bottom left of the box as that's a safe spot. However, where the RNG comes into this is if the first crescent spawns next to the corner on the bottom, quite often you'll be rushing to get into the corner and will have a crescent spawn on you, resulting in a hit. Now once you kill the Snowdrake, you can then follow the normal route until you reach this room right before the dog duo fight. From here, we dance on the bridge until we encounter Lesser Dog. Now quickly before you go and attack him, we can head over to item and use the stick in our inventory, which was our previous weapon. This forces Lesser Dog to do this move where he'll jump at you. For this move, the strategy is to bait the jump early and sneak under him. You're now able to one-shot him and jump right into the Doggeressa and Dogamy fight. The dog duo can be disastrous if done wrong. The main thing for this fight is you have to kill Doggeressa first, because if you end up killing her boyfriend first, she basically goes Super Saiyan mode and will give you a very bad time. Whereas if we kill her first, Dogamy will be sad and give you a free kill. As for the moves, both are very consistent as long as you know how to dodge them normally, so the only thing you need to know is that for the axe attack, always go to the sides that the first axe jumps. Moving on, the next important area is Greater Dog. Greater Dog has 105 HP, meaning he'll take 3 hits to kill. Greater Dog once again has 2 possible moves. For the first one, Greater Dog spawns a spear which at some point turns blue, where you can stand still and let it pass over you. For this move, you really just have to get familiar with each variant of the move so that you can read when to stay still. The other move is when Lesser Dog is sleeping and will only attack you if you wake him up. Therefore, all you have to do for this attack is to not move at all. After that, there's one more set of dialogue to spam through, and once that's finished, reset the room and start farming the Ice Caps, Childrakes and Jerrys, making sure to reset the step count after every encounter. Now at this point, we're around 20 to 25 minutes into the run, so I much preferred to flee from the triple enemy encounters and only fought if I had an Ice Cap and Jerry combo. Jerry's a weird enemy because he has super high damage resistance, however isn't actually able to attack you, making him a no-hit runner's best friend. Once you get the but nobody came screen, we get to move on to the final fight of the section, the Great Papyrus. Waterfall, despite being in the consistent tier on my ranking earlier, was the split I lost the most amount of runs to, maybe only being beaten out by Undyne. It's also my favourite area in the game, as it has the best looking environment and enemies. To start off the split, we start by running past our first encounter with Undyne and fight the first monster of the section named Aaron. Aaron has got to be one of my favourite enemies in the game, as during the whole run, out of everyone who you actually have to fight, he's the guy who cost me the least amount of runs. He's also hot as fuck. For his first move, he starts flexing his muscles, which rise to the top of the screen. For this, we want to instantly move to the top of the box, as this will practically shorten the move by making it take longer for each muscle to reach us. For his other move, he gets all steamy and starts spawning sweat from all around the box. For this, I found the best position to be was somewhere around the bottom middle, as it gives us the most time to react. But mostly, like the Snowdrake, you just have to be alert for bad patterns. Moving forward, in the next room, we encounter Washua. Washua, to be honest, was the first enemy I really struggled on, mostly due to his wacky moveset. To start off, Washua sprays water like a sprinkler, which surrounds the arena. For this, we move to the bottom of the box and try our best to not get hit by going between the tight gaps of the droplets. The move that really screwed me over, however, was the screensaver soap move. I never really worked out a strategy for this move and sort of accounted it to luck whenever I got it, although I'm sure if you practiced it, there would be a consistent way to go about it. Next up, we cross the bridge into the first of two running sections where Undyne tries to gun us down with spears. Now this part is very important. As I explained in the intro, these running sections are one of the two grey areas of this run's rules, specifically in what counts as a hit. Undyne spears, instead of directly dealing damage to you, instead take you to an encounter where tons of spears spawn in from the roof in a way that almost always will result in a hit. So, are we meant to count the damage we take in the fight as getting hit, or are we meant to say the actual contact with the spear is what counts as the hit? In my run, I say that it's the taking damage part that actually counts, as if I were to dodge the spears, it would look really cool. So for that reason alone, I allowed it. That is my rules, and if you don't agree, then you can go do the run for yourself and leave a mean comment saying that I suck. Now that that's cleared up, I have to say this section is always terrifying, as the strategy I ended up learning always cut it way too close in multiple spots. Now I did try my best to try and explain my method, but it ended up a complete mess, and so instead here's a raw clip of how I do it in case you wanted to follow along. Once we've escaped Undying, we follow the normal path until we reach this crossroad. Here we want to go left until we reach the bridge and dance on said bridge until we encounter the double mold smalls. After one-shotting both of them, we move forward and interact with the bush in this room to get our new weapon, the ballet shoes. Something I haven't mentioned yet in this run is how the different weapons each have their own unique way of attacking. For the stick, it's one slow moving attack where you have to hit as close to the middle as possible. We then had the most annoying ones being the tough gloves, which was similar to the stick but required us to mash Z or enter after aiming. Now here we have the ballet shoes, which have faster random patterns of 3 lines instead of 1. It's worth noting now that it's important to get used to both the ballet shoes and the next weapon that I'll introduce in a little bit, just so that we're dealing the max amount of damage possible, specifically for Undyne and the core later on. After equipping the ballet shoes, we then go back to the crossroad, head down and follow the normal path all the way until we reach Undyne's second running section. For this one, instead of piffing darts at our head, Undyne spawns spears from below us, which always gives us a second to react and get out of the way. I always found this run to be far more consistent than the first, as the path is always the same reasonably wide and straight run each time. Just like the first run, we also have a way to manipulate the spawning of the spears. Undyne is always trying to predict where you're running, so to manipulate her spears, you have to learn the rhythm that the spears spawn and move to the bottom of the path as they spawn. This will either make them spawn on the bottom tiles of the path or not at all. You then follow that rhythm the whole way through, following the path below you, and once reaching the dead end, face Undyne and fall down into the dump. From here, we run into and kill Mad Dummy, who's now Glad Dummy because his integer overflowed his anger levels or something along the lines, and move forward into this room where we first encounter and one-shot Temmie, then the Mold Smalls, and then from there, we once again reset the room and fight until we get the But Nobody Came screen. When it comes to the encounters, there are 3 options. The first is a single Temmie, who we swiftly one-shot and move on. The second being an Aaron and a Washua, in which you kill the Washua first so that we don't have to deal with the duo combo attacks. Lastly, if you manage to mess up the mold small kills from just before, you will have noticed that the second one turned into a mold big. These guys are easily the worst enemy in this entire section and are extremely difficult to beat without getting hit. So when it comes to the mold big and Washua combo, you have two options. You either have to one-shot the mold big first, making sure not to miss your attacks too badly, and then deal with the Washua attacks right after. Or, you can just flee the encounter altogether. Finally, after getting the but nobody came screen, we walk through these two pitch black mazes, have Monster Kid interrupt our fight one last time, and last but certainly not least, kill Undyne. Undyne acts as the halfway point of the run, where starting at her the run becomes a real challenge. As I mentioned at the beginning of the Waterfall section, this fight is one of, if not the section that I lost the most of my runs to. Mostly from the mental fatigue after the 50 minutes of perfect gameplay it takes to reach this point. Undyne's fight is composed of 13 unique attacks, played in a fixed order that stays the same between each run. But once she reaches the 15th attack, the fight enters a loop that repeats until someone dies. The most important thing for this fight is the damage we're dealing to her throughout the fight. On move 15, there's a move this guy on Reddit called the Super Spears of oh god why? And I have to say, it's the perfect name for it, as just, well look at it. Fortunately, if we're consistently dealing enough damage, we're able to skip this move altogether. To avoid this move, we have 15 attacks to kill her, meaning with 23,000 health, we have to be averaging 1,533 damage each hit to kill her before the Spears of Death move. To get this amount of damage, this requires us to be hitting at least one perfect hit each time, which with a little bit of practice isn't too hard to manage. With the impending damage check in mind, most of Undyne's attacks use her special green mechanic, which locks us all in place and gives us a shield to block off her attacks. As I said, each attack she throws at us is the exact same move in the exact same order each time, and so with most moves being a rhythm game, there aren't many tips I can give besides to just memorize each and every attack until you develop the muscle memory to consistently no-hit her. That's not the case for all of her moves however, specifically on moves 4, 5, 9, 13 and then the attacks that have the reversed arrows. Going in order, the first non-set move is attack 4, where we get turned red and Undyne spawns spears from around the box that goes straight to the heart's current position. This attack is the most RNG based in the whole fight and is the only reason Undyne isn't a 0 out of 10 on my RNG rating. My main tip for this attack is to not move if you don't have to. The more you stand still, the more the spears will be going to the same location and therefore less of the box will be taken up. On the next move, Undyne narrows the box and spawns arrows from the bottom which we have to move left and right to dodge. The way I did this was to stay at the top middle left, between the left and the middle arrows where you can alternate between to dodge as necessary. Move 9 and 10 both repeat the exact same attack that looks extremely daunting at first. The box goes massive, and Undyne starts spawning rings of arrows which go in circles as you try to navigate through them. While this move is pretty complicated, there's a consistent way to beat this using this pattern to our advantage. You start by tapping up left to get through the first 2 sets of spears. Then hold left to go through the 3rd layer, and directly after, hold down to get through the 4th. We then hold right for the 5th, and tap up and right to go through the 6th, and last but not least, hold directly up to get through the 7th and final layer before the move ends. Last but not least, I have a tip for what might be the most daunting attacks when first starting out. The yellow arrows, once reaching you, will flip to the opposite side that they appear from. As all attacks are the same through our runs, you can instead visualize the pattern for each move after memorizing each attack so that you aren't relying on pure reactions. Now that we've mastered Undyne, we can now move into the latter half of the run. Hotland is the shortest area split of the run, primarily because of its shared enemy pool with the core. What I mean by this is that for both Hotlands and core section, we need a total of 40 kills. This however doesn't mean we need to kill 20 in both sections, but instead that we have to kill 40 by the time we reach the end of the core from either of the 2 areas. The reason we don't go out of our way to fight any enemies in Hotland is because finding encounters is extremely slow, especially compared to the rate we can find enemies up in the core. Starting off the split, we run through Elfie's lab, one-shot the Vulcan and Sunder plane who get in our way, and take this path off to the right, going down to grab our last weapon of the run, the Burnt Pan. The Burnt Pan deals the most amount of damage that we're gonna need in this run, and so we don't need to bother upgrading to later weapons such as the empty gun or the real knife. The way it works, close to the ballet shoes we get 4 lines which go even faster than anything before. Also same as the ballet shoes, the more accurate we are, the higher damage it'll deal. If you're able to get 2 out of 4 perfect hits, the damage is greatly increased, and for all 4 perfect hits you're rewarded with 2 times damage. We then go back to the main path and follow along until we meet the Royal Knight duo. This fight is the whole reason the Hotland section is at all dangerous, and also the reason it bears its 8 out of 10 RNG score. You start by killing the first knight, which gives us a 50-50 chance of what move we get. If we get the first move where carrots rain from the sky, we are lucky, and we have to try and make it to the top right of the box where it's impossible to get hit. However, if we lose this 50-50, we have to deal with the star move. For this move, stars start falling down in a straight line forming 3 lanes. Usually, you're just able to zigzag your way through the patterns, but it's possible for 3 stars to spawn all at once, all at the same speed, therefore creating an undodgeable wall, which will force a hit all the way at 50+ minutes into the run. I'll bring up this part more later in my journey section, but for now, we run through the rest of the area, kill Miss Muffet, and reach. Moving on to the core, the thing that makes this section so difficult is the precision it takes to kill some enemies, but also the hour of perfect gameplay that you have behind you. Starting off, we take the elevator to the room before Metaton and head left to the first room on the bridge. After dancing for a little while, we encounter one of these 8 possible combinations. Straight away, we can knock off these 4 encounters as they're not consistent enough to be doing this late into the run. That leaves us with these 4 encounters with these 4 enemies. Starting at the first one, we have a Whimsalot. A Whimsalot has 95 HP, and so as long as you don't miss one of your Burnt Pan hits too badly, you should be able to one-shot it. Also, when it comes to encounters with Whimsalots and another enemy, you have to always kill the Whimsalot first, as its moves are pretty horrendous both alone and in its duo encounters. Moving along, we next have the Final Frogget with 100 HP. Final Frogget is the enemy we mostly want to be fighting when we have the chance, as their moves are the most consistent of the bunch. For his first and most fun move, like the original Frogget, Final Frogget will jump at us, but instead will jump towards our soul's position rather than just up and left. For this, we can run to the top right corner of the box, where the frog will start spazzing out and be unable to hit you. For its other move, it does a juiced version of its fly attack, where the flies will spawn rapidly from the roof and go right for the soul's location. For this, you go straight to the bottom and move left to right to avoid each fly, and after about 3 times up and back, the move should end. Third to the plate, we have Astigmatisms at 120 HP. The main reason we fight these guys is because we are technically able to one-shot them as long as you get the 2 out of 4 perfect hits. If you miss the one-shot, then you better pray you get the easier of the 2 attacks, which in my opinion is still harder than both of the Final Frogget's moves. Starting at the easy one, the Astigmatism spawns these circles from around the box. They then choose a spot in the box to bounce off and move in a straight line. For this move, my strategy was to stay against the bottom of the box, as it was rare for one to push me off the line and I usually wouldn't even have to touch my keyboard. For its other move, it spawns these spinning circle towers, which come from the right of the screen and start to block off the entire box. For this move, it's very common for the towers to completely block you off and force a hit, which is why you really want to be one-shotting the Astigmatism if possible. Lastly, for the final enemy, we have the Magic at 190 HP. Meaning we either have to hit 3 normal attacks, 1 semi-perfect and 1 normal, or a perfect attack to kill it in one go. When facing this guy alone, he's probably the most consistent of them all. For its 2 moves, one has him spawning an orb, which then orbits around the soul, which is pretty self-explanatory. For its other, it spawns these crosses from orbs that appear depending on the last directional input you do. For this, I ended up creating my own consistent pattern where I would stay still to let a couple crosses come out from the top left, move up and right to do the same thing with the top right spawns, then back left, and then finally sneak through the top right of the crosses and move to the bottom where the rest of the arena is empty, which will take us to the end of the move. That's a lot of words. Now that we know each individual attack that we have to worry about, the final thing we need to understand is that for both group attacks, we have to leave the Froggets for last, meaning Whimsins and Astigmatisms both take priority. If you manage to get all 40 kills without taking damage, we can then kill Mettaton Neo and move on to the final and easily the hardest section. Words don't do justice to how stupidly hard the finale is for this run. Keep in mind, once we reach this final fight, we're roughly an hour and 15 minutes in with no mistakes. And so with the whole run on our backs right now, we have to make sure that we've memorized and perfected each and every single one of his 23 attacks. Not all of Sans' attacks have specific strategies, and more just require you to complete them normally. And so what I'm going to do for this section is run through the entire 5.5 minute fight one move at a time, explaining only the moves that have specific strategies and just let the fight play out for the ones that don't. I'll also be leaving a ranking of difficulty for each move in the top right corner, just in case you're interested. Just before we start, I wanted to make this clear. At the end of the Sans fight, Sans does a move where he slams us against the wall a ton of times, each hit dealing some amount of damage to us. This damage is unavoidable and therefore is not counted for the no hit run. With that out of the way, let's see how you do it. If you can reach the very edge of this jump, you can tap up and right to make the jump perfectly every time. For this move here, we want to stay on the bottom layer around the middle. You only want to go on layer 2 if you have to jump over the bones, and should never go on layer 3. After making it through the first way, we can hug the right. This will position us perfectly to make it through every bones. Like for move 7, we want to hang around the bottom middle layer, only jumping to the second if it's necessary to dodge. After jumping through the first 2 walls, we can stay on the very edge of the left. We can then stay still until we jump at the last bones again. After move 14, you can't just spam fight now, because a bone appears in the menu, and now you just have to wait and double click enter the second it passes the button. This move, you have to train yourself to see where the Gaster Blasters are facing, then you can move perpendicular to them. After move 16, we now have bones running across the bottom icons. For this, we first have to tap right to move to act, and then back to fight after the bone passes the button. For all slam moves, we're able to press every arrow key down to auto input the opposite direction that we get slammed. After move 18, we have to deal with both menu bones. To do this, we have to swap to act straight away again, then back after the bones move, and then finally time it to where the select button's bone has also gone. After you do the last spin, and right before you get slammed into the wall, you can hold the right key. This will make it so that we perfectly align ourselves to frame skip all of the wavy bones. Lastly, we have to make sure we're on the bottom half of the laser, as otherwise at the end of the fight we'll get dragged through the laser to get hit. Alright, now hopefully everyone understands the run and we can start getting into the meat of my journey. To paint the picture, when I first started this challenge, I just released my first big video where I beat FNAF's 50/20. At this time, me and my friend group had planned a big trip down to one of their holiday houses, which would mean if I wanted to get the video out in a timely manner, I'd have approximately 30 days to beat the challenge, script and edit the video to be ready to leave on the 30th. I also had to pre-record some videos as I wanted to keep my upload streak alive and had 2 exams coming over the next 2 weeks, so instantly 1.5 weeks were lost to video production and studying, leaving me with roughly 3 weeks. At this point, I only had 10 hours on the game and hadn't even beaten Sans before, but even still, I had full faith in myself that I could get it done. From the beginning, I knew that the 2 hardest parts of the run were going to be Undyne and even more so Sans. So, I installed a practice tool used for speedrunning with the intention of mastering both fights before moving into real runs. And so my first day was spent learning Sans with the hope of being able to beat him for the first time. In the beginning, I mainly struggled on the platforming moves as they required a lot of precise movement and control over my soul. I also really struggled on the final attack, as even though I knew the insane looking frame skipping strategy at this point, the final circle move was really hard to build muscle memory for. God, I haven't beat this part once. I've been going for on this specific part, I've been going for 15 minutes. To be fair, this is the final part of the whole fight. This is the final part of the whole challenge. The rest of the challenge is literally nothing. But after I lost to the final move, I was finally able to close out a run, finishing with 1 HP, like most players' first runs do. The next couple of days were spent trying to perfect Sans, where my strategy was to set a save point at a specific move and not move on until I beat the move 3 times in a row, in which I would then move the save point to the next move and repeat until I slowly got good enough to beat the fight without healing and set a record of just 3 hits in the whole fight. After 3 days of straight Sans practice and nothing else, I started to grow sick of the repetitive practice, and so I decided to change up the pace a bit by giving Undyne a shot. Straight away, Undyne felt 100 times easier, and after 30 minutes of practice, I was already getting close to a full no-hit fight with her. And so I set a challenge for myself that I wouldn't end stream until I got that perfect fight. Oh my god, I did it, never mind. Now, I always knew that Undyne was going to be a far easier fight than Sans, but seeing the actual gap was pretty insane. I'd already managed to do to Undyne what I'd been trying and failing to do to Sans for the last 3 days, or roughly 10 hours of gameplay. I wasn't worried though, as I believed that I just had a mental block with Sans where I couldn't close out the run without getting hit at least once, and that when I finally did get the run, it would allow me to consistently beat him hitless. The next 4 days were spent doing multiple hour sessions of full fight attempts, where by the 13th of June I was able to consistently beat him while only getting hit a handful of times. But no matter how close I was never able to close out the run, getting hit mostly in the later parts of the first phase or the second move in the second phase with the Gaster Blasters. On the 14th, I started up a stream where I set the goal of not ending the stream until I no-hit Sans, just like I had done with Undyne, and that day, I was playing well. Hey, first no hit. That definitely counts. Oh my god. After 6 days of practice, I'd finally beaten one of Undertale's hardest bosses without getting hit. But wait, did you see it? At this point, I didn't realize it, but I technically hadn't gotten the run, because during the final slam attack, I got dragged through the lasers to hit the wall. This right here is exactly why we have to start in the bottom half of the box for the final circle move, but at the time I didn't know that, and even now it's still close enough to the real run, so I'm happy with it. Even if it technically didn't count, this still marked a huge milestone in the grind, as I'd now no-hit both hard parts of the run, and it made the challenge feel just that little bit closer. As June 16th rolled around, it marked just over 1 week of practice, and once again I started to get antsy. Even after another 2 days, I hadn't managed to no-hit Sans again, and I'd stayed stuck in the 1 to 2 hit range per fight. I couldn't stomach more practice, but I still wanted to stay productive, and so I set out to beat my first ever full genocide run. But I hit 3 perfect shots onto me 105, but then I tripled. I didn't have the hit overlay on screen at this point, but I was using it in the background. For my first run, I had gotten hit 17 times, which felt great as most of the hits came from the core where I'd gotten hit 11 times. For the first run, I was pretty happy with the progress considering I'd only been 1 week into the challenge and still 2 weeks away from the deadline, and so I was rightfully excited to keep trying runs to lower down my hit PB. Over the next couple days, I started a regiment that I picked up from Armada of all people. Since quitting Melee, Armada picked up speedrunning Super Mario 64, and he always started his streams by practicing all of the hard sections of the run. And so before I started my runs for the day, I would practice Sans for 10 minutes and then do a run or two of Undyne until I felt warm and ready to play. After my run in the previous day, I knew what I had to look out for, and so after the warm up, I started to make extremely fast progress where I broke PB after PB, starting at 16 hits, then 14, and then finally all the way down to just 8 within the span of 3 days. For the 8 hit PB, I'd gotten hit once early in Waterfall, and then 3 times to the core and 4 to Sans. I also had another run right after that matched the pace, but got ended at core with 5 hits, so at that point, it was becoming painfully obvious that the last 2 splits were gonna be the problem. Which sucked, as I realized to reach that far into the run without getting hit would require an hour of perfect gameplay. Here I faced my first problem. The rapid improvement that I had left me confused. Now, I've never tried to no-hit a game before, and Undertale as a game was never built to be no-hit. At this point, I thought I was at the mercy of RNG when it came to encounters, as I believed that for the genocide run, you were unable to flee any fights. This would leave me taking very unoptimal encounters, especially in the core where I'd be fighting every inconsistent combo, which is why I would always be getting hit the most during that section. This realization of how heavily RNG based this run is, started to turn into frustration, and I started to question if I'd bitten off more than I could chew for this challenge. I also started to feel guilty for every walking moment that I wasn't practicing Undertale, as I knew the 3-week time limit was pretty harsh. But I decided it was too early to be stressing over it at that moment and to just see where the next couple days took me. The 19th and 20th came and went with no new PBs, and I was stuck taking hits to earlier parts of the run, particularly mostly in Snowdin and Waterfall. This meant that I wasn't getting any of what I called pressure practice, where I'd have to face the nerves of a run where I hadn't been hit into the later sections. At this point, I was still practicing Sans and Undyne, but I had also started practicing enemy encounters in the core and the Burnt Pan moveset. The more I practiced, the more confident I became, and so after 3 days of struggle, on the 21st of June, I managed to break my PB once again. One hit on sands. Oh fuck, that's a good run.
Good run.
That is a great run. 4th attack
After
as well.
PB.
Oh, I did actually. Oh, this
Really?
run is so getting done.
I think you said the goal for today was like 5, right, as well?
Yeah, so that's gonna be a hard run to beat. Like low-key, the next time I beat this run, I'll probably get hit once in core. Or maybe I'll no-hit core. And then after that, I think not next time I beat the record, but the time after, I think it'll just be no-hit. Like once I get hit twice on the game, I reckon I'll just go no-hit next. I don't think I'm getting hit a single time. Bro, who knew all it took was a bit of music and no lights.
Darkness. Bad.
I had now just half my total hit PB down to a total of 4 hits. In the run, I had managed to avoid getting hit all the way to the core, where I then got lucky with encounters and I mainly struggled with the Froggett's fly move. I then had a record-breaking run with sands, only getting hit in the fight early on in the 4th move. With 9 days left in the challenge, I started to believe that I could actually get the run done before the deadline. The 22nd of June was my first bad day of grinding. Up until this point, I'd seen improvement every day, whether it had been through practice or the PBs in the real runs. But at this point, my practice was starting to plateau, as I'd mastered Undyne in practice and had been stuck at a few hits per run on sands. That day, I had started upstream and did my warm-up. After that, I did 3 runs that all got ended to Snowdrake in Snowdin 20 minutes in. This introduces the next problem I started to face. One that would haunt me for the rest of the challenge. I felt like I'd completely wasted all the time I spent doing runs with no successful attempt. At this point, I started resetting any run that didn't make it past Waterfall, because my record was at the point where if I did get hit before Hotland, it just wouldn't be able to compete with the record. With the warm-up and runs, I'd been playing for roughly an hour and a half, and it felt like I had nothing to show for it. Worst of all, it felt unfair. In the Snowdin explanation, I explained the bad RNG move of the Snowdrake, and this is the moment where I felt it the most. Most of the time, you need to get pretty unlucky to not only face the move, but also get the exact pattern that results in the hit. Not only did I get unlucky once, I managed to get the bad pattern 3 times in a row, which completely killed any sort of motivation I had to play that day. With only 8 days left and the weight of the deadline approaching, I had to make every day count, and with every day wasted, I fell further and further from my original goal. The next day, my first run once again managed to reach the core, where I managed to only get hit once thanks to realizing I could flee from almost any fight I wanted. I then ended up getting smoked by sands, but I was at least happy to be able to see improvement in what was one of the hardest splits of the run. I then did 2 runs later in the night after a break, but both didn't make it as far as I was hoping, first fizzling out at the beginning and then to bad RNG at Hotlands. My main problem at this point is that I was only doing on average 2 to 3 runs per day for an average playtime of roughly 2 hours not including practice. After losing runs early on, I was often left with a lot of frustration, which would make me unable to stomach any more playtime. At this point, I only had 1 week left to get the run, and I felt like I was slowly falling behind courtesy of my work ethic. I knew at this point that it was in the realm of possibility that I get the run on time, but the biggest issue was that I hadn't even reached sands without getting hit before, and so that meant I hadn't had any practice doing him under a lot of pressure. That and also the fact that I still hadn't been able to replicate the no-hit of the fight in practice made me feel like the goal was drifting further and further away. That was, until the next day. On the 24th of June, 6 days before the deadline, I managed to get this run. After getting hit early in Waterfall, I managed to beat the core without getting hit for the first time. I then also managed to beat sands, only getting hit once on the second move. With this, I had now managed to beat each individual section without getting hit, which meant all that was left was to string together the run within the next 6 days. I started the 25th off strong. I decided to push myself in practice by going for Undyne the Undying is Dead. I got this idea from Bones, who I've mentioned previously in my 50-20 video. Basically, this just means I try to beat Undyne no-hit 3 times in a row, essentially meaning I perfected her. I actually ended up exceeding this by beating her 4 times. I also pushed myself to get my second ever Sans no-hit, and this time, I was going to do it properly. Over the 25th, 6th and 7th, I was getting okay runs, but the spark was starting to wear out. After 3 weeks of grinding, each loss weighed heavier than the last, making it harder and harder to start new runs. By the 28th, with only 2 days left, the deadline felt impossible. The stress had completely killed my motivation, and I couldn't bring myself to launch the game for the rest of the weekend, bringing the pre-holiday arc to an abrupt and quiet end. We had a great time on our holiday, and it helped me reset my mental, just as I was hoping going into it. And so when we got back slightly over a week later, I was fired up and ready to get this challenge done. I'm gonna try my first few attempts. I'm just gonna start with Sans. Not as washed as I thought I'd be, which is a good sign. With the solid effort at Sans, I fortunately hadn't regressed in skill as much as I was worried that I would, and so for the first time in a week, I set out to do my first run back. Alright, I am doing my first run back. Feelings going into this run. I don't know how this is gonna turn out, to be honest. I wasn't that bad in practice, but I don't know if it's realistic to sort of expect that much success on this run. I don't know, I guess we'll find out. We end up with 8 hits. I can realistically get rid of Waterfall if I tried again. Core probably also Undyne. Average Undertale run, am I right? Alright, I'm fucking exhausted now. That I don't know what it is about fucking Undertale, man. Oh, once I finish Ruins, I'm like exhausted afterwards. Yeah. Oh well. That's my first run back. A weird phenomenon I experienced throughout the challenge was that after 5 to 10 minutes, I would start getting really exhausted. And I really only have 2 reasons that I can think of to why this happened. The first 30 minutes at this point, from Ruins to Waterfall, is just pure brain rot. There's no real threat unless I drop my guard, and so obviously for the first 10 minutes, I'm paying my full attention so I don't lose the run. This would then drain me of all my energy, as I was using 100% power to stay locked in. My other theory was that I had psychologically conditioned myself to get tired by just seeing and hearing Undertale, as maybe a couple months before this, I'd end up putting an Undertale video on just before bed to fall asleep to. Now which one it was, I guess we'll never know. But I think the second one is funnier, so I'm just gonna go with that. By the end of the challenge, this started to dissipate for some reason, but for now, this is what I attributed to most of my run failures. As I was exhausted, I decided to take a couple hours break until I felt ready, in which I then started another run, this time making it to the first Undyne running section. Alright, I have Shay up. I'm not fucking getting hit on this shit again. After this fail, all of the feelings I felt just before leaving for holiday came flooding back. I don't know what I wasn't expecting this to be this hard, but it's not hard. Like, it's hard, but it's not mechanically hard. And that's where it's getting me. The whole thing is that you can see this run I just did. I got to Undyne's first running section, 33 minutes, and I just do something stupid, and that's literally 33 minutes down the drain, man. It takes so long. There's nothing I can do about that. It's just like I'm doing the fastest I can possibly go, in like the most consistent way I can possibly do it. And I've had runs that have made it like an hour in, it goes all the way to core, and then I just get hit by something I shouldn't have. Like, maybe I didn't one-shot a astigmatism or something, and you don't understand how hard it is to keep fucking playing when every mistake that I shouldn't be making costs me hours of my time. I was kind of feeling like this before my break, and I thought the break would help, but I don't know, it hasn't really. I'm not gonna quit, but I don't know. The wasted time was really starting to get under my skin, not just because of the lost attempts, but because every failure meant sitting through another 30 minutes of brain rot for another attempt at an attempt of Sans. Thankfully, talking to the camera and using my journal to vent about my frustrations really helped me clear my thoughts, and I decided to do one more run for the night. Oh my god, dude. Oh my god. Okay. Alright, Sans. Play nice. Okay. It's PB at least. It was like the gods had heard me. After all the struggle, I finally had my first taste of Sans in a real run, and although it ended abruptly in the first move, it was at least progress, and I knew that the next time, I'd be able to take it further. That night, I had the realization that I wanted to share because I thought it was pretty poetic. I started this challenge off by practicing Sans. The first thing I did was beat Sans for the first time, and he's by far what I've practiced the most. But still, he's the only thing standing between me and winning this challenge. Just goes to show how insanely difficult he is compared to the rest of the run. I didn't have much to show for my efforts on the 9th. I played a run early in the day, lost it to Undyne, and didn't touch the game again that night, even though I'd planned for 1 or 2 more runs. Then the 10th seemed to follow suit with no notable runs, until randomly, I had made it back to Sans once again without getting hit. But unfortunately, once again the pressure had gotten to my head, where instead of freezing this time, I just had a major brain fart that messed with the muscle memory for the 3rd move, ending my second chance at finishing the run. The days after that were rough. I ended up with a 4-day stretch where I didn't get a single run worth saving. I was still putting multiple hours of grinding into each day, but every attempt fell apart at around the 40-minute mark. And at this point, I already had hundreds of gigabytes of Undertale footage just sitting on my PC, and so I decided not to save any of the runs that didn't show any improvement. Basically meaning, for July 11th through 14th, there was actually nothing to show. Over these days, I found myself stuck in a loop of loading up a run, thinking it could be the one, then losing it 30 plus minutes in to something I should have ironed out weeks ago. Over the days, I had continued venting out my frustrations, with most sharing the same conclusion. I still don't know how far away I am from getting the run. Even though realistically I'm close, and from my record I'm very close, it could literally be a couple weeks before I get the run, which is just too long. I also can't just quit now after I put so much into the challenge. On July 15th, I had a run going into Undyne, the wall who had been keeping me trapped over the last 4 days of nothing. Ugh. Why I fucking fat fingered, bro? The outburst of frustration instantly turned into despair as my head sank into my hands while I stared at the reflection of Undyne through my phone, just thinking. I was supposed to have the run by now. Before the holiday, I'd gotten so close, but here I was still failing on the part that I'd supposedly already mastered. I opened up my journal and started writing, just trying to make sense of what I was feeling. I just lost another 50-minute run to a fat finger, and I just realized what I've been doing. I spent over 100 hours on this challenge, and I don't feel any closer than I did 2 weeks ago. I'm sitting in my dark room every night doing 1 or 2 runs, getting nowhere. This is the first time I've really considered calling this video a failure. Now, I'm gonna get a bit vulnerable here. I've always believed that if you try hard enough at something and really give it your all, you'll eventually succeed. That belief is the reason I started taking YouTube so seriously in the first place. Now, a little while ago, my friend told me that they didn't see it that way, and that sometimes for some people, no matter how hard they try, it will just never be enough. And since then, I've made it my goal to disprove that. Because, well, if they are right, then what does that mean? For this challenge, for all the time I poured into it, and more importantly, what does that mean for this channel? While I was doing that run, I had a video of Bones playing in the background. He had talked about his FNAF luck run, which took a long time to finish.
It has been 6 days!
I'd been at this for almost a month now, and when I lost that run, I reflected on how this challenge was affecting my life. During the making of this challenge, I had almost only posted slop content that I could shit out while I worked on this big run, and that wasn't helping me grow at all. And at each video, doing worse than the last. I was spending so much of my time and effort into making this video that I had basically put everything else in my life on pause. And with the run going nowhere, what was the point of sacrificing so much on my potential before I even got to show people what I was made of in the first place? And so after an hour, I decided it would be best to put this video on an indefinite pause, despite the month and a half of work that I'd already put into it. I just couldn't do it. I wasn't ready to hang up the towel just yet, but the sentiment of wasting too much time on the run stuck with me. So I decided, if I could find a way to speed up the completely safe sections of the game, even if it meant using hacks, I'd allow myself to do it. Now, I'm gonna be fully transparent here, and all I ask of you is to hear me out. After deciding not to give up, I started looking for a way to keep going that didn't mean sacrificing even more of my life to this run. The problem wasn't the challenge itself, it was how much of the game wasn't a challenge at all. An Undertale Genocide run takes around an hour 20 to finish for most runs, and for that, only 30 minutes is actually playing the game, doing things like fighting enemies, bosses, and then dangerous running sections. The other 50 minutes is spent running on the walls, trying to get encounters, or just running through long safe sections to reach the next area to farm. I wanted to find a speed tool that allowed me to speed up all the safe sections, where I had no possibility of having the run end. And so I found a cheat engine table for Undertale that let me bind a hotkey to speed up the game. I want to be clear, I only ever use this for non-gameplay parts like getting encounters and walking between areas. And then for all the fights and Undyne running sections, I turned it back to normal speed. Every difficult part of the run stayed the exact same difficulty, and that's why I allowed it. I thought a lot about how this would be received, and I'm sorry it took this long into the video to go over this. I completely understand if you don't agree with me that it still counts, but at the end of the day, I still did all of the hard parts legit, and I genuinely wouldn't have came back to the challenge if I didn't do this. After all that, I finally had a setup that would let me go at my pace. For the runs, you can see what I set up on the table. I only have the box checked saying speed tools, and then only the one that speeds up the game. No slowing down the game, and no god mode. With this setup, it now only took around 50 minutes to reach Sands, effectively trimming off 20 minutes of nothing gameplay. Now, this might not sound like a lot, but when failing over and over and over, this 20 minutes turns into hours and even days. With this new momentum, something changed in me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't dreading every attempt, and I started pushing for 4, sometimes even 5+ runs a day. It was also at this time I beat Sands without getting hit in a real run for the first time. I did it on a run where I got hit early, and so I ended up turning off the recording, but because it was the final run of the night, I decided to play it out. So now with my 4th ever no-hit of Sands, I now had every piece of the puzzle, and all that was left was to actually close out the run this time. On the 17th, I had a run that got lost 10 minutes in to bad Snowdrake RNG. Yeah, like that would have been 15 minutes right there. And then another that made it all the way to Hotland just to lose to bad Royal Knight RNG. But these both didn't faze me, as all I could think about was instead of losing over an hour, I had just saved 30 minutes that I could now use on whatever else I wanted. And that's just a few days ago, it would have been completely wasted. On the 18th of July, I was having another terrible day, with not a single run making it past Undyne, and so I was ready to call it quits for the night and move on to the next day. But I decided to do one last run. Oh my god, I think I barely made that. Jesus Christ. Alright, let's lose this to the first moon. Okay. Move 3 actually the hardest move in the whole fight?
New perspective gained from all the pain and strength. wanna do come back on stronger than ever before. So
Okay, lock in.
this baby no peace. Look into my eyes. Now tell me the things you love about behind my back. The tenacity, our heart is hard to break down. It's to let go. I wonder this is going down.
Oh, I did it! Holy fuck. And with that, I had now just beat Undertale Genocide hitless, becoming one of 8 players in the world to achieve this feat. I could probably go on for hours going over everything I wanted to say while making this video, but here are some things that I wanted to talk about most. This challenge was horrible, and despite me still getting it done, it was definitely way out of my league, at least for now. I could have very well just done a no healing run and called it a day, but for the way I went about this run, I didn't involve myself in any sort of Undertale community, and only ever watched no hit runs to learn what I should be doing, meaning I didn't understand how hard this challenge actually was until I was too deep into it. Going into this challenge, I genuinely thought it would be easy, and that again, I'd be able to get the video out within 1 month time, but here we are a whole 2.5 months later after I started my journey. Now I know I was just shitting all over the challenge, but that's because it really did take everything out of me. Because in a weird way, this video became more than just a challenge run to me. It became the embodiment of a belief I've held close to my heart since the start of this channel. Lastly, I just want to apologize for how long it took to get this video out. As of the day this goes live, it's been exactly 1 month since I beat the run, and the reason it took so long is because I was treating this video like it had everything riding on it. Like my future on YouTube depended on getting this video perfect. But to actually finish it, I just had to accept that I wouldn't be perfect and instead focus on making something I could be proud of, which I've done. Maybe the video is messy here and there, but to be honest, I'm not even sure how I managed to get this video out. Over the last week, I've edited the video probably over 8 hours a day in a sprint that I will never be recreating. Next time I'm gonna give myself the time I need to polish the video as much as necessary, but at least for this one, I just really needed to get it out so that I could finally put an end to this journey. If you made it this far into the video, just know I appreciate you more than you can imagine, and I hope you'll stick around for whatever I try next. If you have any suggestions for some challenges I should try, feel free to let me know in the comments, and besides that, I think it's time for me to go get some rest. Until next time.